change scenario.
Fire managers face many challenges implementing controlled burns. These include the public's general fear of fire, irritation with smoke, increasing regulations and liability issues, and a growing concern for carbon emissions in a changing climate. By midsummer 2012, 1.8 million acres had been treated with prescribed fire in the U.S. 1.3 million acres of this total were burned in the Southeast, while only 42,000 acres were burned in California.
Some of the reasons the Southeast does a lot more burning, they give liability insurance to any prescribed burn manager that's gone through the training and completed and is a part of their system. And so every time you get a burn permit, you are covered liability-wise, which is something that California and all these western states do not have. And so with Florida, the nice part down there was the community, the laws, the people know that fire has to happen. And so with that, they want things burned.
As a community here in Northern California, we're afraid to use one of our most powerful tools. And so part of our work through the Fire Safe Council has been to kind of put the use of that tool safely back in the hands of the people.
You know, once you learn about fire and you feel more comfortable about how fire works, who it is, what it is, you can see that it can be good or bad. You have to understand how it works. Then your relationship with fire can be more relaxed.
Petey Brucker began burning around his home on the Salmon River after losing 2 previous homes to wildfires in 1977 and 1987.
Yeah, some people think that I should be calloused about fire and that I should think it's really bad. But that doesn't really open my mind and let me understand how it works, what fire is, because fire's not innately a bad thing.
The frequency of escapes is very low, less than 1% of prescribed fires escape, but that 1% does stand out in people's mind.
We do successfully treat a lot of acres with prescribed fire every year, and people only hear about the failures, and those are pretty few and far between.
Lenya Quinn Davidson grew up in Hayfork, in the heart of Trinity County, a very fire-prone area of Northern California. She's the coordinator for the Northern California Prescribed Fire Council.
For part of my master's thesis, I went back to Hayfork and interviewed people about their perceptions of prescribed fire. And I had taken, over a year to plan this project, and I was all geared up to go to Hayfork. And that was in June of 2008 when, lightning started thousands of fires all over Northern California. And so I was really worried about going and talking to people in Hayfork about prescribed fire, not only because of kind of my understanding of the perception of fire in Hayfork based on my own experience and my own nightmares about dry lightning and about wildfire as a kid, but also because now we have these huge wildfires going and people were having some really negative experiences in Hayfork that summer associated with the fire suppression efforts. So I thought that all of that combined would really put a damper on the responses I was getting from community members. But I was really surprised to find that most people I interviewed in Hayfork, and I interviewed 25 different people that represented all this kind of whole spectrum of the community, there was a really strong support for the role of fire in local forests. The interesting part was that it was all about who was doing the prescribed fire. And I think the big lesson that I got out of that study was, people do know that fire is a part of the ecosystem generally, but trust is everything. And if people don't trust the people who are doing it, and if there's not trust between, in this case, the Forest Service and the people in the community, you're not going to get anything done.
Decades of effective fire suppression have left residents expecting smoke-free summer skies. recent large fires have strained relations between fire managers and smoke-impacted communities.
I would say that to have some expectation that the government or any other entity is going to keep the air pristine and free of particulate matter in a fire-adapted, fire-resilient, even fire-dependent ecosystem is pretty naive to think that you can live in such an ecosystem and not have smoke at times. But at the same time, it's very fair to say that in the wake of the 2008 season, where there were such profound smoke impacts, that the public's going to be less tolerant of that for some period of time after an event like that.
Extensive public outreach is key to successful burns. Community meetings, press releases, postings on notice boards, and special outreach to smoke-sensitive residents are all critical for maintaining public support for controlled burning.
You have to kind of do things like switch or alternate watersheds or air sheds where you burn, just try to give people relief and not hit them year after year.
The California Air Resources Board and their regional air quality management districts are charged with keeping the air clean for the state's residents. Through Title 17 of California state law, prescribed burning is treated as a nuisance to be regulated, often pitting air quality management districts against prescribed burn managers.
What I've found is that it's important to work with our air quality management district and not necessarily treat them as an adversary in this. I have to say that they have been very conducive and understanding of what we're trying to do out here. Examples of that are they've given discounts to the people buying permits that are part of our burn program. We involve them early in the burn season. We show them what we're trying to do that year, and we work together to figure out how to get those burns done. On several occasions, we've been able to burn on no burn days because this was our last good burn window before the end of the grant period.
Of course, you know, under EPA regulations and state regulations, wildfires are pretty much exempt from smoke regulation. And this is one of the reasons I think that people are going more to this unplanned ignition kind of issue, because if you burn an acre from a lightning-caused fire, as an agency, you're not liable for the smoke that emanates from that. You know, and I've been down here in the Klamath because I'll come hell or high water. And I've lived through some tremendous smoke episodes. And I can understand why the locals don't like it. But one of the ways out of that is to think about prescribed fire in the off seasons of the year. And you're not going to be burning up a couple 100,000 acres at one time. You're going to have limited impacts on the smoke resource.
The Western Regional Air Partnership published guidance in 2005 to define natural versus man-made smoke emissions. The partnership classified Native American cultural burning and prescribed burning as natural emission sources. In addition to smoke regulations, some regulatory agencies see climate change and the need to sequester carbon as another reason to limit prescribed fire.
I think it's really important that we don't hamstring forest managers by saying that because of climate change you can't use fire as a management tool. These systems are going to burn eventually, especially as we see more dry periods and more wet periods, and this oscillation between the two off into the future and overall warmer temperatures. We're going to see a much higher frequency of large fires on the landscape. And so steps we can take now to restore fire as a process in these systems will really pay dividends off into the future. They will emit some carbon, but the benefit is over the long haul that we'll have intact forests that will continue to sequester that carbon.
Despite challenges, communities across the North State are beginning to establish a relationship with controlled fire as a valuable management tool.
As a community, we've seen the acceptance of prescribed burning around homes and in the wildland-urban interface increase over time through having successful burns that haven't gotten away and not getting complaints and everything. But ultimately, we're going to measure our success by how many people in our community own a drip torch and know how to use it.
It links back to the Prescribed Fire Council, is having folks to look around and say, wow, all these people here are taking the same, or seeing this challenge and are trying to face it. And knowing that you're not alone doing these things, I think is really helpful.
The mission of the council is to provide a forum for all the different federal and state agencies and tribes and researchers and different stakeholders who use prescribed fire or are interested in prescribed fire to come together and collaborate to really protect, conserve, and expand the use of prescribed fire.
Burners in California certainly have been ostracized by the larger land management community and to some degree by society. That's an important thing to do, to give people a sense of that what they're doing is important and okay. So that was part of it. Another reason to focus on it was to give peer education, because these folks have been ostracized, and the art and science of prescribed burning is something that's not been focused on enough in the region. It was an area that we could focus science delivery on those issues.
We also focus on communication and on improving training and research around prescribed fire.
And then the longer term goal, to change policy in California, to change policy so that to facilitate prescribed fire, to facilitate fire as a restoration tool, to facilitate fire as a biodiversity management tool, and a fuel reduction, fire hazard reduction tool. It's a ground up approach. And I think having people in the agencies all talking about prescribed fire, subtly or not, I think that also affects policy change.
Just a couple months ago, a national cohesive strategy for managing wildfire was accepted by the federal government. And that is almost revolutionary in scope, because what it involves is integrative management across all jurisdictions. So now it's not just public lands, but private lands too have to be included in holistically thinking about planning, managing fire. The trouble is one thing to have good policy on paper and another thing to put it in practice on the ground. So that's still lots of work to be done.
You have to get buy-in from a really disparate group of people with really a wide variety of values, and it's hard to do that.
I don't see it as an issue that should divide us anymore. It's an issue that we all have in common, no matter who we are.
Fuels treatments over the past 15 years by the Karuk Tribe and Orleans-Somesbar Fire Safe Council have been implemented in preparation for bringing back the ceremonial use of fire on Off-Field Mountain. The stage has been set for this to occur through a recently signed Memorandum of Understanding between the Forest Service and the tribe.
When we're looking at success and we're looking at rebuilding the trust that is going to lead to the types of management actions that are going to restore our historic fire regimes, that all of us working together, the community, the Forest Service, the Karuk Tribe, working together to get fire on Off-Field Mountain through the ceremonial burns that once happened there, it's going to be a powerful moment.
So I think that there is a way that we can demonstrate fire-adapted communities implementing actions that restore and maintain fire-resilient landscapes while being available to respond to fire by establishing a demonstration landscape in an area that's of vital importance to the Karuk Tribe as far as reinstatement of ceremonial burning practice.
And it's individuals who are going to change the current paradigm that we find ourselves in. It's going to be efforts of, small groups of people working together to affect the whole.
Expanding prescribed burning in the complex fire environments of Northern California will require a concerted effort from many diverse stakeholders. It will require communicating a unified vision for restoring fire-adapted ecosystems. It will require promoting skills and experience in the next generation of fire managers. One thing is clear: fire will always be a part of life in Northern California. But our relationship to fire is at a critical juncture. Will we continue to fight wildfires at any cost, or will we learn to bring back fire on our own terms and begin to recreate the fire-resilient forests of a century ago?
We only live, only suspire, consumed by either fire or fire. We only live, only suspire. The dove descending breaks the air with flame of incandescent terror, of which the tongues declare the one discharged from sin and error, the only hope or else despair, lies in the choice of pyre or pyre, to be redeemed from fire by fire. Who then devised this torment? Love, love is the unfamiliar name. Behind the hand that wove that tolerable shirt of flame,